fictional friends, and welcome to another episode of Fully Booked. I'm Megan.
And I'm Shireen.
And it is the second to last week of our coverage of Americana for the month of April over here at Fully Booked. And so for our second film adaptation of the month, we went in a totally different direction from our first week's worth. We talked about The Color Purple from 2023 at the beginning of the month. And today we're heading towards Americana that's much less landscape and more urbanization and modern city setting, but still very much has that feel to it because of the time period and what was happening in these places at this time and the way that it affected the way that everybody acted.
Yeah.
You know, everyone in, like, the business world especially were acting at that time and arguably still do to a degree. But, you know, like, everything kind of in that sphere. So today we're talking about the film adaptation of American Psycho, which was released in 2000. It currently has a score of not enough, 7.6 out of 10 on IMDb, and the critic score on Rotten Tomatoes is 68%.
What?
Yeah. So this movie was kind of critically panned when it came out as, like, a man-hating film, which I just can...
No.
We're in a post-Barbie world where we've seen that happen recently again, that again, it's like, this is a movie about hating men. Yeah. And you're like, no.
You missed the point again.
Yeah, even though the film itself and the commentary itself is largely about, like, misogyny and homophobia as well. There's a ton of that because the story... so the novel was, I believe, published in 1991 by an author named Bret Easton Ellis, and it is set in the late 1980s in New York City during basically the big Wall Street boom that was happening at the time. It was when we really started to see the emergence of, like, finance bros. Like, in the 50s and the 60s, we'd seen, like, businessmen, you know, like your Mad Men style, like, we work at, like, an ad agency or we do this or we do that. And there were people who were doing that before, but this was, like...
on speed.
This was like, this is full finance bros. They still exist. They're everywhere.
Yes,
and, like,
they do. Or they think they do.
Yeah. But this is something that you still see to this day. I just want to counter, though, that the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is 85%.
That makes more sense.
Which makes a lot more sense. And honestly, I would give it higher. I would love this movie.
And, like, I'm not, like, you know, full-fledged horror, because I think this does fall into horror.
It definitely does. It's very psychological thriller horror type of thing. And I would say if you're looking for... The novel is like this as well. I've read the book. But if you're looking for a film that beautifully, or even a story itself that beautifully executes the idea of an unreliable narrator, you found it.
Oh boy, does this do that.
You have found it. This is pre-Gone Girl unreliable narrator that's done in, like, a totally different way. And it pulls it off beautifully. It's so, so good.
That's another aspect of American literature that's quite prominent is the unreliable
We do like
narrator.
our unreliable narrators. It's true.
We do. And, like, often it's more to embellish or to, like, again, if you take, what's his face in Great Gatsby, you know, like...
Nick, yes.
You know, he's the unreliable narrator because he's so in love with Gatsby that Gatsby can do no wrong.
And so he ignores the dark and the weird,
But this one is an unreliable narrator from the main character's perspective of someone who is psychotic to begin with, who falls even further into his psychosis. And it's very hard to determine if what he's describing is actually happening.
Yeah. Did this actually happen? Did it not happen? I think it's a little bit clearer in the novel. Again, that kind of makes sense. It's a little bit clearer in the novel that he's done the majority of these things, although there is still, like, I do find that in having read it, there's still some room for interpretation to a degree, like the crimes that he commits throughout the course of the story. But the film, I find, definitely takes a bit of a more ambiguous stand because you're seeing what's going on, but he doesn't seem to fully grasp himself whether or not what he's doing is actually happening. That happens more and more throughout the course of the film. Like, at the beginning, you're like, okay, he's definitely murdering people. And then you get a little further in. Did he do that? You get a little further in. Whoa, what's going on?
What's odd is, again, that he's being unreliable, not to embellish, but and maybe he is in some ways, because it's making it seem that he's doing more than potentially he is. So maybe he's killing more people, maybe he's being more brutal than he actually is, and maybe as the, again, I'm using air quotes, psycho that he is, maybe to him that's an embellishment. You know, he wants to be doing these awful, awful things, and he wants to be doing more, but he might not have actually
necessarily doing it. Yeah. So, I think that so basically what wound up happening with this film is that initially there were like a whole bunch of really big directors that were being considered for the film. Stuart Gordon, David Cronenberg, a lot of like really big names in the industry. They were kind of like, you know, they wanted to really like keep things set in the 1980s because, again, this was like a period of time where like the whole like finance world was really coming into its own and becoming kind of what it is now to a degree. And so it was just, it's just white men in suits who all look the fucking same, who all do the same
really
things.
They really do a good job of that.
Oh, it's so good. Who all do the same things, act the same way. So when they were doing that, they couldn't really like settle on like one particular director, and wound up I believe it was Lionsgate who made this film. The rights and everything for the film were given to Mary Harron, who also co-wrote the screenplay with Guinevere Turner. So yes, women wrote and directed this film.
It's awesome.
And it shows in the interactions between the male and female characters.
Oh, it very much does. Yes. Because they do an excellent job of demonstrating how the women would actually react in this scenario.
Yeah. And so Mary Harron pushed very hard. Obviously, she'd seen maybe previous work, and also Christian Bale auditioned for the lead role. He was like 24, 25, and she pushed hard for him to be cast as the lead. The studio wanted Leonardo DiCaprio because, of course, he would have done Titanic like right before this and been very marketable and like a really big name.
Yeah.
We were talking about this when we were talking about the movie a little bit when we were watching it, but it very much would have been one of those things. Maybe it wouldn't have been a bad movie, but it would have been a different film.
Well, it's like very different. Like we all love us some Leonardo DiCaprio, but like it would have been a very different movie. And then like he couldn't have played Gatsby after that, and that would have been heartbreaking because he made an excellent Gatsby.
Yeah, just a lot of other roles would have seemed very strange after this. So, and this did lead to actually like Mary Harron was replaced by Oliver Stone for a period of time as the director, and then Stone and DiCaprio had creative differences, so that fell to pieces. So they brought Mary Harron back, but they had like significantly reduced the budget of the film at this point, and they were like, here, work with what you have. So she was like, fine, I'm bringing Christian Bale back. So she did, which was a great decision, and arguably really fully rocketed him to fame.
Oh, definitely. He was excellent in this movie.
He's incredible in this film. Yeah. And like we all know, like, yes, Christian Bale tends to be like very intense and very dedicated to his roles. Everybody really knows everybody really knows like the physical transformations that he goes to, like tons of like weight loss, weight gain, all that stuff. Like, you know, if you've seen things like The Machinist or like Vice and stuff, American Hustle.
Well, what's interesting is he did this movie and then he would have done The Machinist and then he would have done Batman.
Yeah.
So his weight had to fluctuate like crazy.
I'm surprised he's not dead. Like he's 50 years old now, and I'm like, are you okay?
Well, I think he had a doctor say to him like, you need to stop. You got to stop doing this, man. Like you're gonna kill yourself at some point.
Yeah.
You know?
So I'm sure that he has now, and I'm sure that his wife and children appreciate that as well. Yeah. Anyway, so anyway, this is kind of what wound up happening, and I really think that everything was pulled off incredibly well because of that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, American Psycho, set in New York City in the late 1980s, basically like 87 or 88, something along those lines. It's like right before sort of the end of the decade. Patrick Bateman is the lead character. He ambiguously works for a brokerage or whatever, like a firm called Pierce & Pierce, which is on Wall Street. Every person who works there is the same. They all have the same title and the same position. This is such like a funny thing that happens.
They're all vice presidents or something.
They're all vice presidents. And you're like, what do you have, like 50 vice presidents at this place? Although supposedly there is some commentary made later on that apparently Patrick's father like runs or owns the company or something like that. He's like one of the people right at the top.
Well,
so nepotism.
As a side note, like in investment brokerages in general, they do have like the highest position you can have is vice president, I believe.
So it's like everybody.
So there is quite a few of them. Like the majority of them, they do gain that title at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, so because he's like an investment banker, basically, is what it is.
Well,
yeah,
he's a Wall Street bro. Like, he's, you know.
And so he spends, but of course, doesn't spend most of his time working. Spends most of his time at expensive, fancy restaurants and bars and things with his colleagues and stuff. That's pretty much what he does. They drink all day long. They drink all day long. They do a lot of coke and stuff, and that's pretty much like how they spend their time. He has 3 friends who I can never remember which one is which: Bryce, McDermott, and Van Patten. And they're always, the 4 of them are always like the little like 4 that are hanging out, like it's their little friend group. But again, so I think because this movie is made so well, you forget which one is which of the 3, and it literally does not matter.
Like, that's the point, and you see it within the interactions between them.
Yep.
They don't even know who's who, and they don't care.
No.
Because it doesn't matter.
No.
And what I love about this movie is that that's what they're showcasing, is that in, you know, this milieu, in this, you know, setting, like between these coworkers, they don't really care about who they're talking to or the substance of their conversation, because they're constantly looking over each other's shoulder to see if there's a better person to talk to, or somebody with higher status coming in, you know?
You will see throughout the course of the entire film, especially like for Patrick, but I'm sure this happens to all of the characters, he is confused for other people constantly, because everyone is so the same that the other people who they come into contact with from time to time forget who is who, and just think that you're one of the other people, because everyone is the same. Everybody wears the same designer clothes. Everyone does all of these things. And one of the things that we see right at the beginning of the film is Patrick, again, this was also an age of very, like, metrosexual types of men emerging. So men who actually started to take care of their physical appearance a lot more. So, like, yes, like, he meticulously works out. He doesn't eat anything that's, like, you know, like a lot of sugar, things like that. He doesn't really drink that much. Although I love that he's, like, you know, talks about, like, not using a, what's it called, an aftershave with alcohol, because alcohol dries your skin out, but he drinks alcohol a shit ton, which also dehydrates you.
Although it was pretty funny, because watching this, my husband was like, you know, since I saw this movie, I don't buy aftershave with alcohol.
Yeah, he goes through this really meticulous skincare routine and explains his step-by-step of the different cleansers that he uses,
and
the scrub, the peel, all that stuff that he does.
But what I love about that scene is when he's got his mask on, he puts on a mint mask or something, he peels off the mask, so it's like he's peeling off his face.
Exactly.
You know?
And he has that whole internal monologue where he says there's an idea of Patrick Bateman, like what exists, but that's not really what it is.
And he's saying it as he peels it off. It's
so
good.
Which, according to what I had read, actually, he got it in one take. The peeling off,
which is impressive.
It's a hard thing to do. I think, what is it? Vogue recreated that several years later with Margot Robbie, and she had a hard time getting it off her face when she was doing it. So the men are all in a meeting at their firm. We don't know what the meeting's about. It doesn't matter, because they don't do any work.
No, it doesn't matter. Other people do their work for them.
Yes. This is the business card scene. So if you've seen this movie before, you're like aware of what's going on. Everyone starts showing off their business cards that they're saying all look very different from each other, but they all look the fucking same. They all look the same. They're all the same off-white shade. They basically all have the same font, the same cardstock, embossing, all these things. Fun little fact that I don't know for sure, because I hadn't looked that deep into it, if this is on purpose or not, like if this is purposely because no one does any work at this firm, but you've got the person's name and their title and like their contact information, and then Pierce and Pierce at the top. Where it says mergers and acquisition is misspelled. And
is it really?
And I don't know if that's genuine or just because no one actually cares enough about what they're doing to spell the word correctly. And I like to think that that's why.
I would not be surprised given the level of detail in this movie.
Yeah, if that were purposeful, yeah.
You know, I do believe that a lot of the time in these types of settings, people are saying things that sound impressive, and no one really digs any deeper because everything's very like surface level.
Yeah.
And so if I'm and you see it later on, he says to the girl, I'm into murders and
execution.
Murders and executions.
And she hears like, mergers and acquisition.
Mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I forgot to mention there's a really good little bit at the beginning where that's that they're all out for dinner and stuff like that, and then they go to a club, and when they're there, he's getting a drink from the bartender, and he has these coupons. But he can't use the coupons anymore, and she's like, these are not good anymore. It's a cash bar, and I'm sure she said that 55 times that evening.
She's really irritated.
And he has a little moment where he's like, like, you're a fucking ugly bitch. I'd like to, like, cut off your head and play around with your blood. Basically, I like to stab you or something and play around with your blood. And it's interesting because, again, it's one of those, probably he just said that in his head, but maybe he did say it out loud and she fully ignores it, because sometimes women just have to do that.
Mm-hmm. It's much easier than getting into an altercation.
Yeah. We don't know. Maybe she heard it and maybe she didn't. It's interesting. That's like kind of where you start to be like, did he actually just say that to someone? And you don't know. And who knows? Who knows?
I mean, she does have her back to him.
Yeah, and it's loud in the club, it's so loud. Like maybe, but it's interesting to see. Anyway, so when they have this whole like business card thing, everyone's broing up and like pretending that their business cards are better than everyone else's. And they're all like doing it. And of course, Patrick's eye starts twitching because he thinks that someone else's are nicer than his. And then Paul Allen shows up, played by Jared Leto. Remember when Jared Leto was like normal?
This was like one moment in time.
What a fun time. Like in like the early 2000s, before Jared Leto ran a cult, he was a pretty good actor.
Yes. And, does he sing in one band?
30 Seconds to Mars,
he is
right?
30 Seconds to Mars, isn't he?
He's the lead singer, When he was just doing that,
he was
making
totally
good music and making good movies.
Way to go, Jared Leto.
And then I don't know.
Well,
Yeah,
there's been a lot.
I think I was watching
Morpheus happened.
Yeah, I think I was watching a kill count for this, and somebody just like the person who was like hosting it said like when he shows up, and then it's the man, the myth, the Morbius, and I started laughing.
That's it, Morbius, not Morpheus. Yeah.
Honestly, after that movie, who cares? It doesn't matter. The best part of that movie was Matt Smith dancing around in that one scene.
That was a weird movie.
I know. It's terrible. Anyway, it's so bad. This is such a stupid tangent. I kind of, because of how terrible it is, I really want to see Madam Web.
Oh, I know. I really want to watch it.
I think we should
go see it.
I think we should have drinks and watch Madam Web, because I feel like we're really going to have a good time with it. Anyway, doesn't matter. This happens. Paul Allen's one of those also like very showboaty, and everybody has this fucking thing in this movie where they want to get into this really exclusive restaurant called Dorsia. Dorsia is a very big deal. It's like a very fancy, impossible to get a reservation.
Event, for a lot of these scenes.
Yes. Yeah. And of course, that's it. Of course, Paul Allen is like, oh yeah, I have to go, guys. I've got like an 8:30 res at Dorsia. And it's just like, you're like, oh God, these guys are the fucking worst. And of course, it fully triggers Patrick because he has a reservation at Dorsia that no one can get. And because apparently his business card is so much better than everyone else's, even though it looks the same. That it sends Patrick into a spiral, which unfortunately that very evening basically causes him to be walking home, go into an alleyway, find this poor homeless man with his dog. Trigger warning for animal cruelty. This poor homeless man sitting there with his dog. He has this conversation with him in which he's very condescending and tells him he should get a job. And like you'd be like, ew, you smell bad and everything like that. And he's really, really horrible to him. And then basically proceeds to murder this man and his dog in the alleyway and leave them there. So nice. So great.
I did not watch this scene.
And this is one of the first times in which you get an idea where you're like, oh, okay, he's killing people. Like, that's
and like
interesting.
he's clearly been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
This was not his first one, I don't think.
No, that's it. So you see this, and there's another scene as well where he's taking money out of an ATM, and a woman walks by, and he slowly starts to follow her. Yeah. And again, he's tall, well put together, attractive, and so she doesn't
probably smells very good based on his routine.
Yeah, that's it. And he probably wears really good cologne. Yeah. So, she doesn't seem too put off by it, and you can tell they kind of take off together, and we're given to understand the next day that he's definitely killed her, because I believe that this is the scene where he's yelling at the dry cleaner to get the
stain, the blood stains,
the cranberry juice shreen out of his sheets. with the people who work at the dry cleaning, and you're like, I can't believe you would take those and not throw them
right?
out. What a
but also because his sheets are expensive.
Yes, yeah, he's complaining about how expensive they are, and you need to be able to get the stains out of these. And I'm like,
clearly the people at the dry cleaner know what this is.
This Asian woman is yelling at him, in her native language, like to be like, no, like I'm not fucking doing that. Don't give me those sheets. And basically,
then he turns around and says, "I will kill you," and she's like, "Oh my god!" Like, and he believes it based on these sheets.
Yeah, it's wild. And again, that's one of those, it flips back after a moment, so you can't tell if he actually said that to her or not. You don't know for sure. So yeah. There's a Christmas party. I think this is the first time that we meet Evelyn. Is this when we meet Evelyn, his fiance, Reese Witherspoon?
No, I think we meet her a little bit before.
Okay, yeah.
But it's also like, again, with the women in this, they're interchangeable almost.
Yes.
You often see them, and this is interesting because in movies, oftentimes, like, just to demonstrate who's with who, they often sit them together or pair them up or make sure that they're near each other in close proximity to remind the viewer that, like, this is a couple. But in this movie, just as much as the men, it doesn't matter who's who. It doesn't matter which woman is
with who. Yeah. So Patrick is engaged to Reese Witherspoon's character, whose name is Evelyn. They have a dinner with another man who works at the firm named Lewis Carruthers, who is, like, obviously, like, your doofus of the group, right? He's, like, the one who wants to fit in a little bit more, but he's, like, less finance bro-y and, like, a little bit more excited about other stuff type of thing. And he's, like an overeager puppy with Patrick. It's weird. And you understand why later, but you don't know why at first. He's dating a woman named Courtney, who Patrick's having an affair with. We're pretty sure that Evelyn's having an affair with one of Patrick's posse, the guy that Justin Theroux plays, their Bryce, I think.
Right. But again, no one cares.
It doesn't matter. We're pretty sure that they're having an affair because they're always flirting with each other. He and Courtney are having an affair. Courtney is constantly on some sort of, like, Xanax lithium combination that makes it so that she's barely coherent.
Yeah.
The majority of the times was a very strange sort of dynamic. She just seems, Courtney is a very sad character to me. You don't see her in very many scenes.
I feel very bad for Courtney. Like, she keeps mumbling that she just wants kids.
A baby.
She wants a baby.
Yeah.
She says, I want 2 kids.
It's very sad. Yeah. She has, like, a couple of moments like that where you can tell that she's just, like, a very sad and unhappy person. Yeah. It's awful. Anyway, you have that interaction. There's a Christmas party that happens not too long after this, which Reese Witherspoon always makes me laugh in this with her little Merry Xmas. She's like walking around everybody, Merry Xmas, Patrick. And she has a Vietnamese potbelly pig as a pet because, of course, I'm sure it was trendy for a minute, and so she has one. He thinks she's ridiculous and he ignores her most of the time, and he's with her because I'm sure that her family is wealthy and it looks good.
Yes.
And she's with him because he's rich, obviously.
Right. Well, he's a Wall Street bro.
Yeah, exactly. And if his dad basically co-owns Pierce & Pierce or co-runs Pierce & Pierce, I'm sure that his family's very wealthy.
Of course.
Yeah. So at this Christmas party, he runs back into Paul Allen, Jared Leto, who mistakes him for a different person. Again, this is like, we've seen this once or twice and we're going to continue to see it. And they make a dinner date basically to, like, go and, like, catch up or whatever.
They go to Dorsia.
They don't go to Dorsia.
Oh,
no. They go to this other place.
Okay.
And then when Paul Allen gets there, he's just there and he's like, we could have gotten in at Dorsia. I could have gotten us a reservation. Like, like he's
that's
so.
where I got confused.
Yeah. No. Nobody ever goes to Dorsia in this movie that we see.
Oh, right.
Patrick never goes to Dorsia.
I will add that throughout this movie, they're, like, talking about food and they're trying to make it sound really pretentious. Yes. But the whole time I'm like, yum.
Yeah. So they do that. They go back to Patrick's place afterwards for drinks and stuff. And Paul Allen's fucking wasted, like, off his rocker. Basically, he's on the couch and he's basically, like, leaning to the point of, like, he's gonna fall off soon type of thing. But this is when you notice that you're like, oh, they're in the apartment and it's very stark white and everything everywhere because that's, like, Patrick's very clinical. But all the furniture is wrapped up and there's newspaper all over the floor. And, Paul Allen hasn't noticed for a while because he's really drunk and
also self-absorbed.
Yes,
yeah.
Very much.
Is the argument for all the characters
kind of, yeah. So, and then this starts Patrick on his little, this is, like, probably the most famous scene in the movie, but it starts Patrick on his little spiel where he likes to talk about, he has this obsession with, different musical artists and knows like meticulously their entire discography, like their entire backstory of the band and everything, and the types of music that they've put out and what his preferences are and everything. And it just is something that makes you be like, God, this is like life before we could yell about stuff on the internet that we did or didn't like. This sounds terrible. Like before we could just like rant about it on Twitter. Like this is what people did.
Yeah, because we can get it out of our system now on social media and then generally leave our friends and family out of it, like in a verbal way.
Yeah.
But like in this movie, and he's got such an interesting taste in music.
It's very interesting for his character. It's very funny. So he puts on Huey Lewis in the News. He puts on Hip to Be Square, which if you've ever heard that song is like a bop. So you get really into it. And slowly but surely he's doing things. He puts on this like a transparent, basically like raincoat type of thing over his clothes. He goes to get this axe, which is the most pristine axe I have ever seen in my life. It is shiny. Like gleaming. And like Paul Allen's so drunk and everything. He's just like, are you wearing a raincoat? Like, yes. Is that a raincoat? Yes, it is. And he has this really unhinged rant where he's talking about, that's at the sort of background of Huey Lewis and the News and like their previous history in terms of like what they've put out when they really came into their own and stuff. And it's this whole funny like commentary about it. And then immediately, right after that, kills Paul Allen with an axe.
Yes.
It's mostly done off screen. It's not really like, yes, this movie has like some pretty like graphic to a degree moments, but this is one of those films where you think you see more than you do because you don't physically see him chopping anyone into bits.
No, there's just a lot of fake blood.
There's fake blood. There are body parts and stuff that you see like afterward, but there's not really, it's not as bad as you think it is. The visceral reaction that is caused is because of how unhinged the character is when he's doing something. Yes. And the implication of the way that he's doing something, which is something that you see a couple of times later as well with some of his other victims. So he kills Paul Allen. He has his whole rant where he's just like, try getting a reservation at Dorothea now, you fucking stupid bastard. And it's great.
It's all about Dorothea.
And it's one of those things, it's like something so serious is happening, but the way that he does it, I always laugh during that scene because you're always like, what? And you're like, it's not funny, but it's funny.
It's not funny, but it's funny.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the theme throughout this movie.
Yeah, you're like I should not be laughing.
I should not be laughing, but it's a little funny.
But it's very funny because Patrick is just so crazy. And I mean, I've even seen like, in other scenes where he has like, he says really strange things that put people off, or like he does things that are really bizarre and stuff, and you're just kind of like laughing at him. Like even Christian Bale himself, like when he was doing like press and stuff for the film, what he said, he was like, well, that's why like like that's the thing with the characters, that you laugh at him because he's so absurd. You're not laughing with him about anything, right. You are laughing at him because you're like, wow, like you,
like if only you could see how ridiculous you are. Even though you're trying so hard to be so perfect, that's what's making you ridiculous.
Exactly. So he takes Paul Allen's body back to his own apartment, back to Paul Allen's apartment. Sorry, just to clarify. Which, of course, he says he's annoyed because it's a little bit nicer than his.
Again, completely ridiculous.
Yeah. And then he he puts together this whole story where apparently Paul Allen is quote unquote going on a trip to London. So
and they keep zooming in on his like luggage and stuff. Have you noticed? Like they're zooming in on Paul Allen's stuff.
Yes.
And again to like point out that he's slightly better.
He has nice stuff. Oh, he's got nice stuff. Yeah, that's it. So he packs some of his clothes, leaves this really stupid a message on his answering machine to say he's gone off to London or whatever for a bit and he'll be back eventually type of thing. They do that. Some time passes and I guess we're kind of like, oh, he's gotten away with it.
Mm-hmm. As usual.
Exactly. But then we're introduced. So Chloe Sevigny plays his secretary, Jean, who we've seen a couple of times already. Like she's shown up in a couple of scenes. This is also when you've seen with her is where you get a lot of the misogyny that runs throughout the course of the story with the character. In one of the early scenes where, again, Patrick's sitting in his office doing absolutely nothing. He never does work this entire movie. She comes in to give him his messages, walk him through meetings and stuff like that he has going on. And before she leaves, she's like, is there anything else you need or anything like that? He's like, don't, she's wearing pants. And he's like, don't wear that outfit again. Wear a skirt or a dress. And she thinks she mishears him at first. And he just repeats the exact same thing. Oh, and high heels. I like high heels.
Yes.
And you're just like, ugh. Yeah. But unfortunately, Jean is very young, and she has a crush on Patrick.
And also, she is, like, a real person.
Yes.
Like, and that's the contrast with her character and everyone else in this movie, is that she is a genuine person.
Yeah, she's not putting anything on. This is just who she is. She's, like, she's, like, a little bit demure, very shy, probably a little bit naive because she seems quite young. You know, she talks about going back to school at one point and things like that. So this is obviously just like a job for her. But, you know, she's found herself with this like, you know, powerful man who presents himself very well. And she has a bit of a crush on him. It is what it is.
Understandably. He's very handsome.
He's good looking. That's it. He's quite attractive.
And big.
Yeah. So, one day, I think, again, when he thinks that everything's going to be totally fine, but you can tell he's like, you know, slowly but surely the fractures are starting to form a little bit. Jean comes to see him and she's like, there's a man named Donald Kimball here to see you. And he's like, huh? Who? And she's like, a detective. And he's like, okay. So Donald Kimball is played by Willem Dafoe.
Who arguably could have probably played the American Psycho a lot.
Like, he would have been great.
His face and stuff. And
forget Leonardo DiCaprio. Like, Willem Dafoe could have done that. When Willem Dafoe smiles, it means 6 different things at the same time.
100%. He's very scary.
He is very scary. He's a great actor.
Shade, no tea.
No, he's a great actor. He's so good. But it's just like 7 different things at the same time. It's very funny. So he actually, I believe he's a PI, and he's looking into Paul Allen's disappearance because I think that Paul Allen's family is also very rich, and I think they're trying to keep it kind of hush hush until they figure out what the fuck is going on.
Yeah.
So they have an awkward and stilted conversation about what, you know, they previously were, like, the last time they'd seen each other. And it always makes me roll my eyes and laugh, of course, because, again, it was the 80s and everybody was just the way that they were and, like, the way that they talk about things. So, you know, he says, like, we'd gone to see a musical called Old Africa, Brave Africa. It was a laugh riot. And you're like, Jesus Christ.
The lines in this movie. Like,
they're so good.
They're so good. Like, they're so... there's like 7 levels of like meaning behind every line in this movie.
Definitely be aware that like there's a lot of it was the late 1980s, so yes, misogyny obviously, but there's also a lot of homophobia throughout the course of the film.
And racism.
Yeah, there is racism, and there are a lot of homophobic slurs specifically that are used throughout the course of the movie, so do be aware of that. Like if you're kind of, you know, whoa, what the fuck is this movie? Like that, there is a lot of that because unfortunately that is something that would have been happening at the time. And I know a lot of people, I think when it came out too, a lot of people were like, oh, it's like, you know, it's the movie's homophobic because of the characters. But this is what the novel is like as well. Bret Easton Ellis is openly gay.
Yeah.
And he did this purposefully when writing the story, because of course he did, because that is what the 80s, this was like just maybe slightly post-AIDS crisis, probably still, it was probably still happening at this time.
Right.
Homophobia was rampant.
Right. And you could also argue that Patrick Bateman himself has like a level of like, you know, he's
repressed sexuality. Gay. Yes, 100%.
100%.
Oh, definitely.
You know, especially with his reaction towards Paul Allen. Like, it's kind of like, oh, clearly he kind of likes
so
Paul
obsessed
Allen.
With Paul Allen. Yeah,
that's
it. So he has this whole conversation with Kimball, who, you know, you're like, okay, you know, who's like, okay, I'm going to keep looking into this kind of thing. If you remember anything else, let me know. What's interesting about Kimball's character in every scene that you see him in is that apparently what they did, because you're very confused by Willem Dafoe in this whole movie. You're like, I don't understand like what he thinks actually happened. But the thing is, when he was making the film, Mary Harron, the director, she had him give 3 line deliveries for every scene that he did. So one where he doesn't think that Patrick's guilty at all, one where he's sure he's guilty, and one where he thinks he might be guilty, but he's not 100% sure. And what they did in editing post-production is that they kind of spliced together different ones in different scenes. So it's really difficult to tell what angle he's coming from. And the point of that is that everything is told from Patrick's perspective. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't know how much Kimball's aware of and whether or not he thinks he's guilty. So because of that, as the audience, we also don't know.
It's quite brilliant.
It's really smart.
It's very well done. And it's really funny because you pointed this out when we were watching it, that every time Patrick Bateman is talking to the PI, he's very sweaty.
Oh my God, he's so sweaty.
It's the only time that he breaks a sweat. You know,
well, it's until he goes crazy towards the end there.
Well,
but
that's different. But like, it's the only time that he kind of loses his like, you know, cool, calm, and collected demeanor is when he's kind of looking at this detective, going, maybe this guy doesn't like me. Maybe he sees through
maybe he knows
me.
exactly what I've done, and he's just trying to catch me in a lie or whatever it is.
Yeah.
for sure.
It's very well done.
Yeah. This leads into an interaction where Patrick picks up a sex worker on the corner. He calls her Christy, and he's like, your name is Christy. We don't know what her actual name is. He picks her up. He also calls like a call girl service to get another girl who he calls Sabrina. That he invites them both over to his apartment with, obviously, well, like the call girl I think would have been doing that anyway, but the other girl was like sort of standing in a particular area, and she was like, I'm not supposed to leave, and you can tell she's probably looking around for her pimp, chances are. And, you know, he's like, well, here's a lot of money, so of course, obviously, she goes back to the apartment with him. Yeah, they have like, you know, like some weird interactions and stuff where at first everything's kind of going okay in the sense that, like, you know, he's like, here, take a bath, like, you know, do this, do that kind of thing. And it's like kind of strange stuff, but it's not anything that would make anyone uncomfortable.
Well, I mean, maybe, yeah.
Like, he's acting weird, but it's not that bad.
I guess.
You know what I mean? Like, he's giving her good wine.
Yeah,
and,
I
like,
guess so.
playing music and, like, being like, here, have a robe, have something, whatever,
Yeah,
like, whatever.
I guess.
The other girl comes over, and he's like, basically, I just want to see you two fuck.
Yeah.
He films them, which I'm like, like the call girl service, are you allowed to do that? I don't know.
I mean, I guess if he gives them enough money.
Yeah, maybe they would just like allow it. I don't know. That was strange.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then the three of them, there's like a sex montage, and it's so funny because he's having sex with them, but he's pointing at himself. He's watching his muscles in the mirror, and he's pointing at himself while he's doing it. Oh, it's so funny. And you're just kind of, and like that gives you like the essence of the level of narcissism that this character has, but it makes me laugh all the time because I'm just like, this, can you imagine?
I can, like, again, they would have had to be paid, like, for this because...
But not even just, like, the sex work aspect of it. Can you imagine finding yourself in a situation with a man who's doing this during the act of intercourse?
I mean, you know, I'm sure that women have experienced
this.
my god.
I'm sure someone's experienced
you would
this.
just feel so embarrassed and just want to get out of there so fast.
Yeah. And like, so like, you know, so he's like, you know, he's not nice to them or anything, obviously, of course not, but he's like, it's more of a normal, like, sort of sexual interaction that happens between the three of them. And then of course, you know, they think things are over. They go to leave and he's like, no, we're not done yet. And he has this terrifying,
we're not quite done yet.
He has this terrifying scene where he opens a drawer where he's got all kinds of like pliers and small knives and these weird things. He takes out a coat hanger. I don't want to know. And then we flash forward to a scene later where they're both leaving and they've obviously both been physically injured by him a lot.
Yeah.
And they, you know, run out. He's like giving them the money as they leave and they're like, fuck off. And they just like leave there. You don't see Christy as much that time. You just see her from the back. But like Sabrina goes to leave and she's got scratches on her back. Her nose is all bloody and stuff, and her hair's all fucked up. Like she looks like terrified.
Yeah,
it's really, again, you don't see anything that happens, but it's really scary. Just the implications of whatever the fuck he did to them.
I mean, at least in this scene, they get to leave.
Oh my god, yeah. Anyway, so he does that, pays them, and sends them on their way. Then at a lunch scene with everybody, Lewis Carruthers, who they all fucking hate, by the way, especially Patrick.
This is the doofus, right?
Yes, exactly. The sort of like mouth breather of the group, I guess. He shows up and he's got new cards. And his new cards apparently are so much better. And it triggers Patrick to the point where he follows Lewis in the bathroom to kill him. He puts his black leather gloves on and he's going to go murder him. Lewis is standing at like the urinal. But of course, this leads into a scene where, again, Bret Easton Ellis did all of this on purpose. He puts his hand around his neck to like potentially strangle him, and Lewis turns around and mistakes this for a sexual advance and reveals that he himself is gay and he's closeted, obviously, and he's like, oh, I've wanted this for so long to, you know, where you're like, oh god, yeah. I wanted this for so long as well. And he like, you know, like tries to make an advance on him. And Patrick it's so funny. He goes to wash his hands with the gloves still on, which makes me laugh. But it's so funny because you're like, I love that he's more disgusted by the idea of a homosexual encounter than by anything else that he does.
Like that goes back to like, he's probably got some sort of, you know, I don't know, exploration of his own sexuality that he hasn't quite done.
Yeah, he panics and leaves, obviously, and like never does anything with that in the first place. Now we're heading into a second interview with Donald Kimball, who's again asking more questions in a very bizarre way because, again, we're talking 3 different types of ways of asking these questions depending on what scene you're watching.
Right.
And, Patrick is like slowly but surely like getting his answers wrong and stuff like that. And Kimball actually legitimately seems to be getting like a little bit more suspicious at this point because he's kind of mixing up where he was at what time or what he was doing. And he's like changing his answers, which is never a good thing.
Right.
Yeah. He panics at this kind of and starts to like it slowly. You can see it like starts to unravel more and more. This is when he goes out with friends to whatever club and he meets that girl. And instead of saying, he says murders and executions instead of mergers and acquisitions. Yeah. And this poor girl, she's a model, and she seems like a little bit naive and sweet, and she's like, you probably think I'm an idiot just because I'm a model. He's like, no, like, I think you're whatever, beautiful or whatever. He's definitely killed her the next day. Her head is in his fridge.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, that's awful.
It's just so gross.
Yeah. A little bit following that, Gene comes to speak to him about, again, work stuff at the office. And then he's sitting there, like, kind of twitching with his sunglasses on inside during the day. It's very strange.
I think at this point he stopped taking his pills.
Yes. Yeah, he has like these antipsychotics that he's taking throughout the course of the film, and he on and off seems to start and stop with that. Yeah. So he invites Jean out to dinner, and of course she's happy because she has a crush on him. Like, she likes him,
Again, naive, young.
Yeah. He invites her out to dinner. And he says, like, come to my apartment before for like a pre-dinner drink, basically. Like, of course she asks because he's like, we can go wherever you want, I'll get us in. She asks to go to Dorcio. It's just...
And I found that really interesting because she's like, how about, and she doesn't seem to know what she wants to say. And then she kind of grasps a name of a restaurant that she seems to have heard him
she's
say.
Probably heard a bunch of them say around the office and been like, oh, okay, well, let's do that. Let's go there.
Do that, because you all seem to like that.
That's the kind of thing that he wants to do, so that's what I want to do. So she's like, let's go to Dorothy, and he's like, okay, and he, quote-unquote, makes a reservation, which no, he doesn't.
Which he did not.
No. So she goes to his place beforehand for drinks. And we think he is going to kill her. He almost kills her with a nail gun. Mm-hmm. But he stops himself. His phone rings, and then it's a message from Evelyn. Mm. So they have this really awkward interaction where she's like, oh, are you still like seeing Evelyn and stuff? Like she wasn't sure kind of thing. And she's like uncomfortable, but she still really obviously likes him. But then they have this conversation where 2 people are talking about 2 different things because he says that she should probably leave. And she's like, okay, like, do you want me to go? He's like, yes, I think if you don't, I might hurt you. Like I might do something bad.
And she thinks he's being all romantic.
She thinks he means emotionally. And she's like, oh, I'm always getting involved with like men who, do things like this and whatever. It's probably not good for me at all kind of thing. And she winds up leaving, but of course he's talking about actually physically hurting her. And it is an interesting thing to see him, that's it, maybe see a real human being and decide that he can't do that to her.
And it's like, okay, so this is where the line is.
There's a limit.
Guy.
Yeah, this is the limit. He has another lunch meeting with Kimball, which at this point I'm going, how many times do you guys have to talk about this? Like that to me, I would also be like, he totally knows that I did something because this is the 3rd time that they're meeting. Like that's not okay.
Yeah.
Right? That's it. So he says he had like lunch or something with a particular person on the day of Alan's disappearance, and apparently Kimball got confirmation of this, which is also confusing, even though Patrick didn't have lunch with this person. So it like confirms his alibi. But again, because these motherfuckers are always confusing each other, you're like, did he have lunch with someone else and think it was Patrick?
Someone else? Yeah.
We don't know. He basically is like, it seems really strange to me that like somebody would just like kill Paul Allen like for no reason or whatever. That's just like not believable, right? Like there must have been a reason. And Patrick's just sitting there again sweating
and like gulping down scotch.
Yeah, he's just like downing the entire thing. It's so funny.
Yeah.
That night again, because every time something happens to throw off his perfectly set like routine that he has, he spirals and he kills someone. That's pretty much like the pattern that we've been going throughout the course of the film.
Pretty much, yeah.
So that night he goes back to the corner that Christy works on.
Oh, I hate this scene.
I know. And
I was literally yelling at the TV.
Yeah, she was. And he's there and he's like, hey, here's more money. Like, just just come and chat with me. No, it won't be like last time, because she's like, I had to go to the emergency room.
Yeah, and then she's like, I'm gonna need more surgery.
I might have surgery. And I was like, oh my God, I don't even
want to know what you did.
No, I don't want to know. So, but of course, unfortunately, again, like, this is what she's doing. Like, she might be in a desperate situation. She's doing sex work. And so he's like, here is more money. Here's a shit ton more money. It's not going to be like last time. Come back to my apartment. Yes, your name is still Christy. We're meeting my friend Elizabeth. Basically, she's going to come. They go to Paul Allen's apartment, where Elizabeth is. She's, that's it, like another woman, like very upper echelon. They've known each other for several years type of thing, who's also just very drunk and hanging out with them. He fully drugs the wine, like right in front of them, and like no one sees it or says anything. I think Christy sees it, but she doesn't comment on it. And she's just sitting there uncomfortably not saying anything, probably waiting for the other shoe to drop at this point and seeing, how soon can I get out of this? Like, when can I leave?
It's so uncomfortable, and she so knows what's going on.
Yeah, she knows something fucked up is about to happen.
And it's just heartbreaking, because you're like, just get out of there, just get out of there, just get out of there.
Yeah, like if you can find a way to leave, just leave kind of thing. They have this whole conversation with Elizabeth, who's played by Gwendolyn Turner, who co-wrote the film. And they do have this funny little interaction where he's like, I want you two to fuck. Like, I just want to see you guys have sex. And she's like, why would you think I'd be into that? And he's like, oh, you went to Sarah Lawrence, like an all-girls school and stuff like that. And like implying she's like, she'd be like a lesbian, basically. It's funny because Gwendolyn Turner is a lesbian. So I'm sure that they did that on purpose just because it's funny. This does lead to them like kind of having like a threesome of some kind. We kind of hop forward and they're sort of like in the middle of things. Christy is like slipping out of the bed, like maybe I can leave.
She's trying to run.
Maybe I can get away. And the other two are like fully going at it. So she's like, okay, I'll just try to leave now. So she's like getting up to like get her stuff. And then the sheet is over both Patrick and Elizabeth. So you don't see anything. But again, all of a sudden Elizabeth starts making like noises like she's in pain.
And then all of a sudden there's a lot of blood
on the sheet. And she's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And he pops up and his face, like I don't want to know where he bit her, but anyway.
Yeah. Ugh. His face is full of blood and he's got like a crazy expression.
Oh, yeah, and he's like, nah. And anyway, so Christy takes off running. She's like trying to figure out, this apartment is fucking massive, Paul Allen.
Huge.
It's
and
so
also
big.
The building is really weird.
The building is so weird. So he's like, she takes off trying to get out, but she's opening like closet doors accidentally instead of other doors. She opens the door and there's dead bodies in it. She starts like a circuit where she basically finds all of the bodies that he's been hiding in this apartment from like the various models and different women that he's been killing, and Paul Allen's body, I believe, as well, and stuff. So she finds all of these. She freaks out. She goes running out into the hallway. She's screaming. She's banging on doors. But I'm like, does nobody fucking live here, or do people ignore things like this? Again, it's one of those you don't know. You don't know. She takes off to one of the staircases. She goes running down the stairs and stuff, trying to get away from him. And this is when he like pops up with a chainsaw. I shouldn't laugh. It's not funny. It's not funny, but funny.
It's funny, quote unquote, because he's completely naked, but he's put on his running shoes.
That's my favorite.
And he's got his chainsaw, and he just looks so happy to have his chainsaw and running shoes on.
Oh, he looks absolutely...
to chase her throughout the building.
Completely crazed. He's nuts. So he goes chasing after her, because also they had like he did catch her at one point in the, like she was trying to get away, and he grabbed her like in the bathroom kind of thing, and she kicks him in the face, and of course you can't do that. And
he's like, not the face! Yeah.
So he's chased after her. She's running down the stairwell, and then we have, again, like kind of an unbelievable thing where I'm like, what the fuck, where he drops the chainsaw at the right moment and it gets her right at the bottom of the staircase.
Yeah, she was right at the bottom of the staircase. Ugh. So close.
It's not cool. Right after that, we hop into a lunch scene with Evelyn where she's just like talking about the wedding and setting a date and doing all of this stuff. And he's like, meh. And he's like, it's like one of those restaurants where, they have crayons and you can draw on the tablecloth or whatever, or like the paper. And he's drawing the dead body.
Yes. Well, he's drawing the scene with the chainsaw and the dead body.
Yeah.
And like no one notices this again.
No, I know. Nobody cares. Nobody's paying attention. So he breaks up with Evelyn, and at first she thinks he's kidding, basically. She's like, oh my God, I'm sorry, don't be so fucking touchy. I'm sorry I brought up the date for the wedding. We'll just ignore it. God. And he's like, no. And he's like, no, I actually mean it. And then she, of course, causes a little bit of a scene. She starts crying and stuff in the middle of the restaurant, and he just leaves. He's there, and he's like, I'm leaving. And she's like, where are you going? I'm just leaving. Where? I have to return some videotapes, is his fucking excuse for everything, and it's so funny. And I wish that I could use that as an excuse.
But you could.
Where would I return videotapes?
It doesn't matter. Like, you could just say it.
Maybe
and everybody would know that you're lying.
Yeah.
But, like, what can you say?
Yeah, I have to wash my hair. Anyway.
Yep.
This is where we kick off the whole portion where I'm like, I'm not sure how real all of this is.
Yeah.
He wanders through the city. He goes to an ATM to withdraw money. There's magically a little stray kitten on the ground for some reason. He picks it up, and then he sees that the ATM is like, feed me a stray kitten. Like, it's written it on the display, and he's like, what the fuck? So he just goes to do it. He's like trying to put it into the slot. Not really. Awful. He just like holds it up to the slot.
He's like holding it up, and he's got a gun to the kitten.
Yeah, he's like, all right, get in there. I'm going to shoot you. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Anyway, and this old lady walks up who he seemingly shoots, and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
And then the cops immediately show up. They chase him around to several different places. He goes through one building, which, and again, it's like nighttime, so there's no one really in the building except the security guard in the lobby, who he shoots one of them.
Shoots the janitor.
Goes running around, shoots the janitor, goes like jogging around, has a confrontation with the police where there's basically a shootout. And again, he shoots like a few times at the cop car, and both cop cars explode. And you see on his face that he looks at the gun like, what the fuck?
Yeah, this is where you start wondering if this is real.
Yeah, where you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Loops back around. Now there's a helicopter involved. Loops back around, goes into one of the other buildings, goes upstairs to his office, like his actual office building. Makes a phone call and leaves a message for his lawyer, Howard.
Harold.
Fuck, I don't remember. Sorry. Again, it doesn't
matter.
No. Leaves a message for him where he has this whole monologue where he confesses to all of these people that he's killed, some that we've seen and some that we have not. Like, he's like, oh, I killed my ex-girlfriend Bethany with a nail gun. Like, what?
Yeah.
We didn't see that.
Yeah. No.
Anyway. A few things like that. Confesses to a whole bunch of them. He's so good in this scene. He just has this entire monologue where, again, he's very sweaty and goes through like this whole list of people, and he changes expressions and sort of the way that he's speaking about it so much. It's so good.
Yeah, he's between laughing and crying and like freaking out, but he's really listing like every single thing he's done, and like, again, it goes to show that he's been killing people for a while.
Yeah. So after this, you're very confused again, because it seems like there's like a police helicopter outside, all of this stuff. But then we just flash to the next day, and you're like, and he's fine.
Yeah.
He's going and meeting his stupid friends for lunch or whatever.
And you're like, so nothing came of that?
Right. And it's again, one of these like finance bro bars. He sees Harold. It's Harold, the lawyer.
Yeah, it's Harold.
Yeah, it's Harold. He sees Harold, goes to see him, and is like, hey, I left you, sorry, like, hey, so about that message I left you yesterday, and Harold thinks it was a joke. First of all, he doesn't think that Patrick Bateman is Patrick Bateman. He calls him Davis, I think.
Yeah, he's just like, oh, haha, like, hi. Or doesn't he call him Carruthers?
It's something, I forget.
Like, he keeps calling him something else, and he's like, oh, yes, I remember that, yes, very good one, yes, pretending you're Bateman. And he's like, no, I am. And it's like, he's got this, like, realization that, like, nobody knows who he is.
No.
After all the work he's put in and everything he's done to fit in, but also stand out in that way.
Nothing has mattered. Oh, fuck. Okay, we totally skipped some of the end of it. I forgot about this. Sorry. When he's going crazy like this after what's happened, he calls Jean from a payphone and freaks out. And then she starts looking into things in his office, and she finds his planner. And the more she flips through it, the more she finds these like horrible, like graphic drawings that he's made of like mutilated bodies and stuff. It's really like, gross.
As the weeks progress, the more
they get worse
doodles there are.
Yeah.
And so it's showing the increase of the number of bodies or like number of people he's killed week over week, and in an increasingly gross fashion.
Yeah. He goes back to Paul Allen's apartment, which is now stark white and clean and is being shown for people to purchase or rent. I have no idea. He has a really bizarre interaction with the real estate agent where you're like,
is she in on this?
Well, that's it. Because he's like, I'm looking for Paul Allen's place. Like, you know, does he live here? She's like, no. Like, who are you, basically? And he has no good reason. So she's like, you should leave. Go away. But she's very suspicious in the way that she delivers this, where you can't tell. You're like,
Did she clean up the bodies?
Did she clean up the bodies or get someone to do that? Did like Paul Allen's family do this to cover it up? Or is he insane and did none of this ever happen?
None of it ever happen?
Don't know. You don't know. So he's very confused. Goes to lunch with these guys, and then finds his lawyer, and the lawyer, again, like I said, mistakes him for someone else and laughs off, the idea of this confession. Haha, so funny. You made a big mistake because, Patrick Bateman is such a dork. He'd never do anything like this.
Yeah.
And stuff. And then he gets really uncomfortable because Patrick's like, again, freaking out and being like, no, I did this kind of thing. And he's like, no, I killed Paul Allen. And Harold is like, that's not possible. I was in London and I had dinner and lunch with Paul Allen 10 days ago.
Yes.
And
so
everyone's
like, did he actually kill the guy? I'm not sure.
No. So he goes back to the table with his friends, completely flabbergasted, like no idea what to think about anything anymore. He's made this whole confession. He's done this whole thing. His friends are watching a broadcast from Ronald Reagan on the TV. So we also remember this is Reagan era America, which was also very like big business. And we're gonna, and we love guns and we love this and we love that and we love violence and everything. Like it was an interesting time anyway when Reagan was president. So, and they're watching, it's so funny because they're watching this whole broadcast, and it's Bryce who starts being like, how can you just lie like that?
Yeah.
It's like he's got like two different faces, he seems like this harmless old man, but then he like, behind the scenes he's doing this and that. And of course you're watching Patrick at the same time and he just like has no reaction to it at all. And he has his internal monologue at the end where he's looking around at all of these guys in this bar who all look the same, act the same, do the same things. And he just says, like, I've done all of this, I've gone through this, and it has meant nothing. Because this confession that I've made, these things that I've done have meant absolutely nothing. And that's how the movie ends.
Yeah.
It's so fucking good. It's
excellent.
And it is fun because it is kind of left up to interpretation. I think it's for you to decide how much he's done, how much he hasn't done. I like to think that there's a mix of things. He's done some of it, but not all of it. I know some people will be like, no, he did all of it or he did none.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I think any of those things is possible because he's such an unreliable narrator that you wouldn't really know.
Right. But the events, whether they happened or didn't, the fact that they're happening to him.
Yeah.
Just goes to show, like, all the themes and everything that we just talked about. It's really, it doesn't matter if they happened or didn't happen because a lot of things in this movie don't actually matter.
No, not really.
Whether they're real or not,
Yeah.
It's just about the effect that it has on him. And, again, it's called American Psycho, which I find so interesting because it's like, what about it makes it so American? And it's this Wall Street.
It's this whole mentality of this time. It's everything. It's the the levels of people of classism that exists throughout the course, the homophobia and like at that time in America,
striving for more and more and more and never stopping to wonder if it's actually making a difference. Yeah,
exactly. It's so great. It's such a good film. If you've never seen it, like you need to watch it. Like we're talking about it. We're really not giving you like all of the information that you need for it. It's just so good. But if you have seen it or you've read the book, maybe you like the book better. I don't know. I don't have a consensus about which one I like better. They're both really, really good. So I think it's more like up to you and what you prefer. Anyway, you can let us know about that over on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at FullyBookedCA. And you can also check out our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/book was way better. But until next week, guys, keep on reading.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.